Tonight's presentation is by Mark Langdon, who has written a few books and done presentations for us before. But tonight it's on mining activities at Hartley Vale in New South Wales, which is located in the Blue Mountains to the west of Sydney. I won't say any more about it because I'll let Mark do the job. Would you please give a wave and to welcome John? Sorry, Mark. Thank you.
Well, when Bill said I'm the entertainment item tonight, I thought I was going to have to break into song and dance.
Yeah. You're not?
No, everyone would be clicking off straight away. Righto. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to talk about Hartley Vale and its tramway. Hartley Vale is located, as Bill said, to the west of Sydney and to the east of Lithgow. Shale was discovered in Hartley Vale in the 1860s and it was found because lumps of shale were washed down what eventually became called Kerosene Creek in a flood. So an experienced mining manager was hired to find it. So he simply followed the creek up to where he thought the shale seam was. In 1865, development of the seam started. And in July 1865, the first of two companies were formed, the Hartley Kerosene Oil and Paraffin Company. As you can see, initial mining was simply by adits and horse-drawn skips. The second company to be formed was the Western Kerosene Oil and Company Limited, which was formed in November 1865. The two companies had a different approach to how they developed things. The Hartley Company had retorts and stills made locally and set up their works at Hartley Vale. The Western Kerosene Company imported the latest Scottish technology and it set up its retorts and refinery at Botany in Sydney. And this is the Sydney Botany works. The reason why it did that was it would have a guaranteed supply of water because it was in the middle of the Botany swamps, which are partly visible there. For the Western Kerosene Company to get its shale out of Hartley Vale is in the bottom of the valley, and the Great Western Railway was on the Darling Causeway above Hartley Vale. So Norman Self, who was the consulting engineer to the company and eventually became one of New South Wales' leading consulting engineers, was employed to design an incline. So tenders were called in March 1869 for construction of the incline. And as you can see, 1865 to 1869, there's been a long lead time for the Western Kerosene Company to import material from Scotland, start erecting their works and be ready to do it. The contract was awarded to William Cornely, who had been one of Patrick Higgins' overseers, and Higgins built the Zigzag Railway. The tramway and incline were completed in December 1869. Now, the incline, as you can see here, is in the process of being finished off, is 600 feet high and has a gradient of 1 in 2. The way the incline was worked was there is a winding engine at the bottom of the incline. The cable went up on a series of pulleys supported by posts that ran along the side of the incline. And you can't see them in this photo because they obviously haven't got to that point of construction. It then went round and the cable then came down the centre of the incline. So a wagon was hooked up, the winding engine started, was hauled up to the top of the incline, and at the top of the incline there was a semaphore signal. So when the semaphore signal went to stop, the winding engine driver knew to stop winding the wagon. It was a complicated way of initially moving the shale up and down the incline, because the skips came out of the mines. Then the shale and the skips were tipped down into a chute into a truck that was standing at the base of the incline. That truck was then hauled up the incline. At the top of the incline, the contents of the truck were tipped down another chute, through a screen and into a truck on the tramway. And then 3 horses were used to haul the truck to Hartley Vale. By March 1874, they'd realised this is too complicated, and they're hauling the mine skips directly up the incline. And in 1875, they removed, so when they started hauling the mine skips up the incline, they were still tipping them down a chute and into a separate wagon. But in 1875, they did away with that system, and the mine skips were hauled from the mine up the incline and then to the railway siding at Hartley Vale. There are actually 2 inclines at Hartley Vale. You can see my cursor. That white line is the main incline that I've just been talking about. And this is a second incline to the retort colliery. This mine was opened in 1883 to provide coal for the retorts and the winding engine, or the boilers providing steam to the winding engine. The winding engine was at the top because there's a report of a bushfire and how the winding engine was destroyed or badly damaged in the bushfire. The retort colliery operated for 20 years, and then they stopped using the inclined retort colliery and opened and added off the road to the railway station. And the road to the railway station is way off to the left. But that only was used for a couple of years when they went back to using the incline to retort colliery. And the retort colliery and that incline operated until the end of operations at Hartley Vale. Well, the retort colliery stopped being used in September 1913 and Hartley Vale shut in May 1914. In the late 1870s,
Can you hear us, Mark? We've lost sound from you at the moment.
railway station. In 1881, the company imported a locomotive from Dubs & Co in Scotland. I've just got to backtrack here. I just only realised I left something out. The 2 original companies, the Hartley Company and the Western Kerosene Company, both started to have financial problems in the late 1860s. And in 1871, the 2 companies were amalgamated. And in 1872, the 2 amalgamated companies became the New South Wales Shale and Oil Company. So the Shale and Oil Company was the one that started mechanising the tramway. So getting back to the Dubs locomotive, it was built as number 1442, and it weighed 14 tonnes in working order and had a tractive effort of 4,230 pounds. Now, the Dubs loco was then used on the tramway from the top of the incline to the railway station, whilst the Mortstock loco was then used in the valley. Whether or not they lowered it down the incline, that's something I can't tell you, but it would have been a heart-stopping moment as they lowered it down, because they'd had problems in the past with breakaways and skips running away down the incline. And they had a fatality in 1870 one of the workmen was riding one of the skips to the top of the incline, and the coupling broke and ran away, and who was killed. The two locomotives were then imaginatively known as the small locomotive and the large locomotive. In 1891, they changed the way the incline was worked. So they removed the winding engine to the top of the incline. And this is the winding engine at the top of the incline. And this new arrangement came in from the 19th of October, 1891. So there's some ruins at the top of the incline, the foundations for the boiler, which is on the right, and the winding engine on the left. They also disassembled and transported one of the tanks from the works at Waterloo to the top of the incline, so there was a supply of water. There was an engine shed somewhere near the top of the incline for the locomotive, but this shed was destroyed in a bushfire in December 1900. And the comment was made that, fortunately, the locomotive was not in the shed at the time. And from then on, after that, they built an engine shed at Hartley Vale station, because there's a reference in the weekly notices about shunting trains towards the engine shed. Now, the way things worked at Hartley Vale station is, this is the tramway coming into the station, crosses the siding on the level, and then climbs up an embankment, so that the tramway was on a higher level than the goods siding. The reason for this was, there's the Dubs locomotive in the background. So initially, the only thing that came out of the valley was shale and skips. So the skips, which you can see in the background, were on a higher level than the New South Wales Railways open wagon on the siding. All they had to do is drop the side door of the skip, and that acts as a chute, so they could shovel the shale down and into the open wagons. And then when they started transporting oil out of the valley, they could gravity feed the oil contents of the narrow gauge tank wagons into the standard gauge tank wagons. The New South Wales Shale and Oil Company had at least 14 of these tank wagons. The second group of 17, which were numbered 7, which were numbered 8 to 14, were built in 1900 by Clyde Engineering, and they had 1,600 gallons capacity. When the first batch of 7 was built, that's something I've not yet been able to find. There was also a couple of tanks erected at Hartley Vale at some stage. There's also shale stored at Hartley Vale, because the shale was not just used in the retorts. The higher grade shale was used in gasworks. In the produced coal gas, they mix in the Mortlake gasworks was about 10% of shale, 90% of coal, because using shale in the retorting process increased the illuminating power of the gas that was produced. Shale was also exported overseas. Germany was a big destination of shale, because Germany at that stage was the centre of the world's chemical industry, and shale was used as a base item in producing some of the chemicals they produced. Don't ask me to go into what they are producing with it, because that's something I haven't been able to track down as yet. Just going back one. I'll just go forward one, because I'm missing a slide. Oh, no, there it is. Righto then. So I'll go back one slide. In 1887, a new refinery was opened. No, I'll go back one step further. In 1877, the company erected its first retorts at Hartley Vale, using to process the inferior top and bottom shale. And the number of retorts gradually increased. By 1880, there was 10, 1881, 40. And by 1881, they're producing between 8,000 and 10,000 gallons of crude oil per week. And the crude oil at that stage was loaded into drums and transported to Waterloo for final refining. In 1886, they started construction of a refinery at Hartley Vale. The problem had been initially a lack of water at Hartley Vale. So they erected a dam on the creek a mile or so from the future side of the refinery and laid a pipe to the refinery. The refinery was completed by April 1887 and was 3/4 of a mile to the north of the retorts. And when I go back to the other photo, the retorts are over to off the left-hand side of the photograph. The retorts were connected to the refinery by a pipeline. So there was a condenser, the hot gas from the retorts went into the condenser, produced, and the gas was condensed to produce crude oil. Then the crude oil went via the pipeline to the refinery. The tramway was also extended to the refinery. And the comment was made, about a mile of tramway has been laid down, connecting with the existing lines and having a branch to the coal supply. And upon this, a locomotive draws the necessary materials for the refinery works. So the track went from the incline at the bottom, the retort colliery, to the refinery. That's the refinery there. And the tramway came in from this side. There was also a branch line in the works to the building containing the tin making plant and case factory. So that they'd make the cases, the kerosene would be put in the tins, in the cases, and then it'd be taken by open wagon to the incline, taken up the incline, and then off to Sydney. And the comment is made, the residuum oils were also pumped into tanks for transmission to Sydney. The Waterloo refinery was advertised in December 1887 for sale or lease. And that's when the Waterloo refinery closed. The products of the new refinery were kerosene, gasoline, paraffin, and lubricating oils. Now I'll work my way forward to the map. So the ruins there are the refinery. This area here is where the retorts were, and now is ash dumps with the ruins of the retorts. That is the incline there, and up there where it says shale mine, that's actually where the retort colliery was. Now, if you look at this kink in the road, and we go back to this drawing, there's that kink in the road. There's the ash dumps around the retorts. The condenser is most likely that structure there. The mines were at the base of the hillside around here. And over the years, as one mine worked out, they'd open a new one. When the two companies were combined, they stopped using the Western Kerosene Company adits and used the Hartley adits into the shale mines only. That was because the Western Kerosene adits were on a downhill grade, so they had to be continually pumped out, whereas the Hartley adits were on an uphill grade, so they naturally drained. So they used the Hartley adits because it saved money by not having to do pumping. Oh, yes. That photo there, the top of the incline is basically behind the photographer. So this is a view of the refinery in Hartley Vale. So to give you a summary of what went on in the refinery had a building containing agitators and settlers, where the crude oil was alternatively treated with sulfuric acid and caustic soda in the agitators to remove impurities, and then allowed to settle. The agitators were described as having an acid side and a soda side. Boiler stills where distillation of the crude oil of different grades of oil was carried out, and they just look like a boiler. A paraffin extraction plant was where heavy oil containing paraffin was cooled to solidify the heavy oil, and this mixture was then taken to the press room where hydraulic presses compressed the mixture and moved the paraffin. The paraffin was then sold to candle makers. They eventually erected their own candle works in the refinery. There was also a separate plant for distilling and purifying gasoline. A row of tanks, including crude oil tanks and 3 stock tanks, were along the rear of the works. Also inside the works fence were an office, laboratory, smiths and engineers' shops. While outside the works were the building containing the tin making plant and a workshop for making the wooden packing cases the company used to send their products to customers. And the fence was erected simply because inside the works was a no smoking area, no naked flame area, and that was to keep people out who might cause an accident. So this is looking inside the works. Along there are the boiler stills. This is a brick fence or brick wall that's designed to be a fireproof wall. So the stills are running along the back there. The sidings in the works, there's 2 sidings here because this pipe system here is the oil filling setup for filling the tanks. So I can assume that one tank was for full tank wagons and the loco could run around, bring empty tanks in, run around, collect the full tanks, shunt them out of the way, then drag the empty tanks up ready for loading. In the background there is the Mort stock loco because there was another siding that ran around the back of the works. And this is just the works office. And here are some of the tanks that were referred to as the crude oil tanks and the stock tanks. There's another row of tanks over here, which are most likely the stock tanks, given where the pipes run. Looking at that scene from a different angle, that's the building that had the carpenters and case making workshops in there. There's a bloke standing on top of one of the tank wagons there at the oil filling point. And there, as I say, the tanks there, and they'll be the crude oil tanks there, because from the back is the boiler stills and all that equipment. That structure there is the scrubbers and agitators. So there was a row of them going back away from the office, is the best way to describe their position. This is on the other side of the works. The works chimney is there. If we go back, orientate yourself. So there's the work chimney. So the photographer is standing up here, looking back this way, down this track where the Mort stock locomotive is. So this building here is the loco shed stroke workshop at the lower level. That's the boiler house, the works in the background there. I was worried I was going to talk too long. I think I'm going to do the opposite. Now, this is once again the Mort stock locomotive. So at some stage, the Mort stock locomotive has been reboilered, because if we go back to the earlier photograph, wrong way. You can see the firebox arrangement on the boiler. If you go to this photo, it's not there. So yes, at some stage the loco's been reboiled, whether or not it's because the boiler wore out or was an unsuitable arrangement, I don't know. This loco I mentioned before, Norman Self was the consulting engineer to the company in the 1860s when the Western Kerosene Company was setting up all the works. Norman Self designed this locomotive. Before he became a consulting engineer, Norman Self was the chief draftsman of Mort stock. So that would explain why this locomotive was built by Mort stock, because he must have been asked to design the locomotive. So then he's gone back to his old employer to build the actual locomotive. When this photograph was taken, I can't tell you. The trouble with searching Hartley Vale is there's only a limited number of photographs available. There was never a resident photographer in Hartley Vale. There was a photographer in Mount Victoria who took one photograph of Hartley Vale. The government printer photographer came out in 1906 and took 6 or 7 photographs. And other than that, there is a handful of, and John Henry Harvey, who was a Victorian, came up and took a half dozen photographs of the works in the 1890s. And other than that, there is only a handful of photographs taken by unknown photographers at unknown dates. This is, the previous photograph was taken looking down this way towards the engine shed and the chimney. And by the state of the works, this is when the works had been closed. The shale started to run out in Hartley Vale, and there was a mine called King's Mine at a place called Airlie, which is near Capety. The New South Wales Shale and Oil Company leased the King's Mine and then purchased it, and it was renamed the New Hartley Shale Mine. So shale was being transshipped from Airlie. There was another cablework incline to take the shale out of Airlie to the siding of what eventually became known as Torbane, load into wagons to Hartley Vale, load into wagons, down the incline to the retorts. So it became an awfully involved process in getting shale to the works. But that wasn't actually the reason why the work shut in the end. It was because in 1906, a new company called the Commonwealth Oil Corporation was formed to start developing a new shale field at what became called Nunes. So one of the first things the new company did was purchase their main opposition, the New South Wales Shale and Oil Company. And they purchased the New South Wales Shale and Oil Company in 1906. In 1912, the New South Wales, the Commonwealth Oil Corporation Company a Scottish retort, the Pumpherston retort from Scotland. The Pumpherston retort was not suitable for retorting New South Wales shale, and I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. So they started retorting shale, and then they started to have structural problems with the retorts at Nunes. So the Nunes works were shut down. And in 1913, the Australian receiver recommended that Hartley Vale be closed in order to reduce expenditure. At this stage, Hartley Vale was the only part of the company that was actually producing anything. Prior to this, and on the 30th of July 1913, 200 tonnes of fuel oil was sent to Newcastle from Hartley Vale by a special train for the Royal Australian Navy destroyers Warrego and Yarra. And that is sort of from this point on, the number of men employed at Hartley Vale declined. And by September 1913, only 7 remained. And in May 1914, it was reported that Hartley Vale had ceased to exist industrially. The last gallon of oil has been dispatched to the small arms factory. During 1915, the removal of equipment from Hartley Vale commenced, and all of the machinery had been removed from Hartley Vale by March 1922, leaving only the building standing. And the last of the works was finally demolished during 1929. Now, the fate of the 2 locomotives. I can only assume the Mort stock locomotive was scrapped along with the works in 1929. This is Hartley Vale Railway Station. The previous photograph of the tank wagons in elevated siding were taken over here. In May 1914, it was reported that large storage tanks at Hartley Vale Railway Station, having been purchased by Fell Brothers and now being dismantled and cut up prior to being taken to their oil works in Sydney. A colliery was opened in the area after the Second World War, and in 1947, there was works done here to extend the siding because the coal from the colliery has been loaded there. So I can only assume all traces of the siding in this area was destroyed in that time. The Dubs locomotive, the indications were that it was just left in the loco shed here at Hartley Vale, and it could have still been there in the 1930s. But where happened to it from then, I can't tell you. When it disappeared. And if anybody ever finds out, I'd be most curious to find out. What's left today? This is the main surviving structure in the refinery. And this is most likely the base for a series of tanks. This is on privately owned land. The person who owns it is the grandson of the bloke who bought the works in the 1920s and scrapped the works and sold all the ironwork for scrap. At the same time, the retorts were demolished. Initially, they were horizontal retorts, but then in the early 1890s, the manager of the company was W.J. Hall, and he was sent to Scotland to see what the latest technology was in the shale oil industry over there. And he came back and said the retorts were unsuitable for use in Hartley Vale. So he designed a vertical retort for use at Hartley Vale, the Hall retort. And he patented the vertical retort in February 1896. And he'd been assisted by James Palmer, who's the retorts manager. And it was designed to retort the lower grade shales. So the top part of the retort is the shale hopper. Then there's a cast iron section with lower temperature. The problem with the retorts at the Palmerston Dunes is what called secondary distillation was occurring. Scottish shale is rich in ammonia and poor in oil, whereas New South Wales shale is rich in oil but poor in ammonia. So what was happening, there was a lot more gas, oil-laden gas being produced, and you're getting secondary distillation of that gas actually occurring in the retorts. And that was generating high heat in the retorts, and that's what caused the cracking in the pumps and retorts at Nunes. So I did make a note of how tall a retort is, but the vertical retorts used in New South Wales weren't as tall as the Pumpston retorts. And the problem with the Pumpston retorts was solved by having extra offtakes for the gas at lower levels. So in some effect of lowering the height of the retort. So the retorts are closed vessel. So these sections here are for the hot gases to circulate around the retort. So going back one, you can see there's the flues. Up there would have been the cast iron section, and that's been ripped out so it could be sold for scrap. So you have the same cross section now. This is the biggest surviving retort structure at Hartley Vale. So you basically have a cross section of a whole retort. The ash dumps are still surrounding the retorts, as you can see. All this round behind the retorts is all ash. The retorts are on Crown land, but they're privately leased at the moment. So there's no access to the retorts. I was able to get the photograph of the ruins of the refinery and the retorts by permission of the two different landholders. The tramway from the top of the incline to the Darling Causeway Road is still intact. And as you can see here, it's drivable, but there's a gate across the entrance to it. The gate has no trespassing on it. Different landholders own the tramway. The first kilometre is owned by one landholder who doesn't mind people walking along the tramway. And whether or not the other landholders have ever been up to their end of it, probably not. So the only part of Hartley Vale that is still accessible is, as I say, the old tramway. And the tramway is about a mile long from the top of the incline to the road. So, are there any questions?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Right. What gauge was the whole setup? One gauge.
Sorry, yes. That's a key question because it was metre gauge. It's probably the only metre gauge railway in Australia. Don't ask me why they selected metre gauge, whether or not Norman Self decided it was, for some reason, it was the ideal gauge, but yes, it's metre gauge.
So it was the skips within the tramway and the incline and the tramway to New South Wales, all three of them.
Yep, because as I say, initially they might have been a different gauge. Initially, the incline might have only been metre gauge, but when they started hauling the skips from the mine all the way to Hartley Vale, they would have had to convert everything to the same gauge. And it simply could have been a case of it's a lot simpler to gauge convert track on the valley floor or on a tramway like this than trying to convert the incline to metre gauge. And
there's a town down there. How did all of the supplies for running a town come in?
Well, initially, when it was just the refinery for the Hartley company, all the supplies came from Mount Victoria. So the baker and the butcher would make a weekly visit to Hartley Vale. But as Hartley Vale expanded, and I'll go back.
So they're coming in by road. It's just not.
Yes, down Mount Victoria Pass it came. And yeah, so initially when it was only just the Hartley Paraffin Company, it came in by the road. What's called Mount Victoria Pass is over the back here. So it came in down this road and in here. And as I say, there's a newspaper report about how the baker and the butcher travel to Hartley Vale weekly with supplies for the township. But when the retorts, they started expanding the retorts in Hartley Vale, then the town went ahead. So this is the township here, and it's a company township. So initially there were 3 pubs in Hartley Vale, the Comet Inn, the Vale, and I'm just getting the third one. The third one only lasted for about 12 months. The Comet Inn is still standing and was a B&B, but I'm not sure of its current status at the moment. The Vale Hotel burnt down in the early 1900s, and the publican was tried in court for arson, but he was found not guilty. But as well as being and the Comet Inn is in this area here, the Vale Hotel was in this area here. There's a school up in here. There were shops in this area, like general store and that sort of stuff, post office. So as the industrial activities at Hartley Vale expanded, the township expanded. And there was a few hundred people living there in its heyday. So Mount Victoria Pass is down the back there. The incline was used initially by people to access the railway station because there's now a direct road from Hartley Vale. Go forward again. This road here goes up to what was Hartley Vale railway station, but this road wasn't put in until the 1890s. So if you wanted to catch a train, you had to take the long way up Mount Vic Pass, up to Mount Victoria, or you could risk life and limb and ride one of the skips up the incline. And I said there was at least one fatality on the incline. And there was another instance where the sons of the mining manager and another leading member of the community were injured on the incline when the wagons broke away. There was a fire at Hartley Vale Station where a number of those tank wagons in the photograph were destroyed. And there's a weekly notice too saying that engines shunting Hartley Vale are to be careful because of the amount of oil on the ground. Any other questions? I've either put everyone to sleep or dazzled everyone with my knowledge.
Any other questions for Mark? Tonight? No. Well, look, Mark, Bill's disappeared there for a moment, but
Yeah, I'm here.
oh, okay. Just hang on, Bill.
Yeah, that was great, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you are, Bill.
Ah, very good. Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, Mark, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Lots of nice photos there. That locomotive that you said was reboilered. I was looking at that and had to look quickly at any details on it. It looked like it had a new water tank on it too. Because the original one showed it with a riveted line along the side. Line of rivets, see? The line of rivets.
Yep.
And that one hasn't. And you've got the dome there. Perhaps the dome wasn't on this. In the second photo, the other photo, perhaps the dome cover wasn't on, and you still got like safety valves on top of a dome there.
Yep.
So perhaps they just didn't put the dome cover back on.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, because the tank that probably would have rusted out fairly quickly. There wouldn't have been much in the way of water treatment. Yeah.
Well, there's a classic comment that there's a letter to one of the newspapers saying how, before the refinery was set up, they had the most pure water in New South Wales. But since the refinery's been set up, all they've got now is kerosene in the water. And that how they've written a letter to the minister, but the minister stuck the letter in his back pocket and forgotten about it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And there's actually, when you go on the refinery site, there's what I can only describe as a tar pit there, that obviously waste products were just pumped into this open pit, and 100 years later it's still there and just has this black sheen on the top. So it's not something you'd want to fall into.
Yeah. I remember reading, I think it was the Giff Erdley book, talked about one of the locations where a waste product was just poured straight into the stream, and it was petrol, something like that.
Yeah, well, that's what they did down at Joadja, because in those days petrol was a waste product, so it was poured into the creek and set on fire.
Yeah,
and that was, after the First World War, Nunes was designed to produce kerosene, but petrol became an important product. So eventually that's why Glen Davis was set up. Rather than trying to change the refinery at Nunes to be able to produce petrol rather than kerosene, they built a complete new refinery at Glen Davis.
Okay, right. Yeah. Oh, really interesting stuff. But very good. Anybody got any other questions?
Not a question, but a sincere thanks for a great show. Lots of lovely research. So thank you very much. It's really, really appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, I eventually intend to produce a book, but one of the complications is that the Western Kerosene Company recruited an engineer from Scotland to come to Australia and supervise the erection of the works. And he eventually left the New South Wales Shale and Oil Company, became the engineer at AGL. Then he left them, set up the North Shore Gas Company. Then he became what we'd now become a consultant for when Joadja was set up. He became the first manager of Joadja. And his letter book survives in the Mitchell Library. But he is a shocking writer. So there's 500 odd pages I've got to try and decipher his writing.
I've finally worked out how to unmute myself. I had a quick question about the map. Where on the map is actually the route of the railway?
Unfortunately, this is the end of the map sheet.
Oh, so it was off that map.
Yes, and the other map that adjoins it doesn't clearly show the route of the tramway. But in the valley, it ran along here, across the road, and into the refinery. And you can actually stand on the road. It's just a very low embankment running across there. So there are sidings into each of the mines, because as I said, there was a half dozen different mines opened up over the years in the valley. Even the current version of this map doesn't show the incline. So, unfortunately.
Yeah. Maps are a wonderful thing. Like these, you can go on a journey without seeing anything. just your imagination of what's out there. No, it's great. Yeah.
I just suddenly thought there is a map that does show the part of the route of the tramway. I should have included that. It's actually a parish map.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
Mark, if you've got some interesting topography there with the area, they were complaining about the deterioration of their water supply there. What were they doing about the sewerage in the area with the town getting to a couple of hundred people? It begs belief that they didn't do anything serious.
I assume it was just either a long drop dunny out the back or some sort of pan service. Yeah, there was no sewage system as we'd know it today.
Yes, you've got some interesting little water runoffs and creeks around there, so it's an interesting way to get your water polluted, that's for sure.
Yep. Well, as you can see, the refinery is right next to this creek, and that tar pit I was talking about there. So yes, I wouldn't take much for stuff to run off from the refinery into the creek and away, and you'll be happy to know that the Rivulet now feeds into Warragamba Dam, which is part of the water supply for Sydney.
oops. Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think about the trouble BHP are in at the moment with that collapsed dam overseas that ruined that river.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, getting back to the maps, if any of you have got the Google Earth edition done by someone by the name of Hairy Legs, it actually shows the tramway in that immediate area as well. I don't know if I can screen share here or not, but
You can if you want to, Murray.
yeah, I'll just do it for a moment.
Just click on share and go for it.
Yeah, okay. Oh, the share there. And I just want to share, make sure I share the right screen. Screen 2, I think. That looks like it. Can you see that? Oh no, press share here, Michael. Okay.
Okay.
I've got it here.
There we go.
And,
got it. Yep.
yeah, and all the green part here. This part up here of the is where that incline was, and the town is just down there. And there's other tracks coming down here as well, which is probably part of it. So that's it. I'll unshare myself now if you're happy.
Oh, and there's the railway over to the right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The this blue is the railway, and the roadway is that area coming down there, which from the roadway you can see the electric cable of there. And I presume, I think this pink one is the 1 meter one.
Yep.
Ends up the top. If anyone has any trouble getting these Hairy Legs documents onto the Google Earth, if you email me, I can walk you through it sometime.
Yeah.
The New South Wales Shale and Oil Company also started a
Thanks,
colliery
Murray.
up on the. Yeah, the New South Wales Shale and Oil Company also had a colliery up near Hartley Vale railway station, but only lasted a couple of years. And there's ruins there, but once again, it's on private property.
Mm.
And there was a siding off the main line into it, and once again, the entire length of the siding is on private property.
Have you seen the map in the Shale Railway book?
Yeah.
There is a map in there, is there?
There's a map in there.
Sorry, we got you down as user. Just identify yourself, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks.
There's Todd.
Right,
There,
Les. Thank
Todd.
you. Yep.
This map.
Okay.
Haven't seen that.
Yeah, that map's been superimposed on that Google map.
Mm.
Yeah. He's got it there.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, we'll look at it later. Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah. So you've got this document, you've got to decipher that 500 pages or whatever it was, if that
Letters of the engineer back.
Yeah.
And, there's him talking about the problems with the retorts and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, so there's a massive amount of detail in his letters about Hartley Vale in the 1870s, 1860s, 1870s.
Oh, at least it survives.
There's another document I'll quickly see if I can share. This may not work out. So can you see that?
We can.
Yes.
That's the actual original Dubs specification sheet for the locomotive.
Right.
And as you can see, it gives the gauges 3 foot, 3 3/8 inches, or 1 metre.
And we don't know why he picked that.
No, it's
strange.
There's no logical reason I can give why he selected it. As I say, unless for some reason decided upon a broader gauge for the incline when it was first set up, because, as I say, the skips came out of the mine, the content of the mine skips were tipped into trucks that were captive to the incline. That truck went up to the top of the incline. Its contents were tipped down the chute and into separate skips that were captive on the tramway to the railway station. So whether or not he sort of decided upon metre gauge because could have a bigger capacity wagon on the incline rather than there's something in the back of my mind that it had capacity of a couple of tonnes, so it could carry more than just one skip load. So that's one argument I can present, but I've got no evidence whatsoever to support it.
Yeah. Was there any German shale workings? So far you've mentioned that our technology was Scottish.
Yeah, the first refining of shale was in Scotland. And one of the reasons why it started in New South Wales in 1860 is because that's when the original English patents were expiring. So they could then use the technology from Scotland without having to pay any licence fee.
Okay.
So I think it started about the 1840s in Scotland. And like Pumpston Retort, it's named after the Pumpston Oil Works, which is at Pumpston in Scotland. So it was a huge industry in Scotland. And the original engineer that came out, Fell, who was part of the Fell family, like John Fell and company took over Nunes eventually. He was a cousin, nephew of John Fell. So they all came from Scotland as well. And there's a lot, big Scottish links in Nunes and in Hartley Vale as well, because workers from Scotland came out here and got work in the shale mines and refining and all that, or recruited and brought out here. So yeah, so there's no Europe link that might explain it.
Yeah, I just wondered about the gauge. This locomotive was made to the New South Wales order?
Yep.
Right, okay. I just sort of wondered whether it might have been a locomotive that they'd had already built.
No, that was my original thought, but the Mort Stock loco was built 2 years before this loco.
So, in the same gauge.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we end up with a silly gauge of 4 foot 8.5 as well, somehow, right?
You reckon New South Wales should have stuck to 5'3"?
Yes, yeah. Well, it converted nicely over to metric, 1600 millimeters.
When did India go meter gauge as its secondary network? Frank Stanford might have that one at fingertips.
Yes, give or take a year, about 1871.
Well, see, Queensland, that was 1860s from memory. So that was 3'6" gauge. So you would have thought a 3'6" would have been more likely than meter gauge, because you've already got Queensland and I can't think when South Australia started. No, they originally broad gauge and then went to 3'6". So yeah, so 3'6" was already in that stage a gauge in Australia.
Yeah.
Norm itself had got a 3-foot gauge loco the year before for a timber operation in New South Wales. So he was not unfamiliar with it.
Yeah.
And Mortstock had built locos in 2'6" and standard gauge. So it wasn't as if this was the first locomotive they'd built and for some strange reason went off on a tangent. They'd already built locos in common gauges used in New South Wales and elsewhere in Australia. So because this was loco number 32, and they'd already built a half dozen narrow gauge locos for use in mines and all that prior to this one being built. So this wasn't the first narrow gauge locomotive they built. Unfortunately, the shop order books for the period, Mortstock shop order books, don't survive. There's about 8 shop order books that survive in the Mitchell Library, not the Mitchell Library, sorry, the Noel Butland Archive, but they're from the 1920s and the 1930s. Yes, they're numbered in the 50s and only have 8 survived. So I'd like to know what happened to the other 50 shop order books, because they would have a wealth of information in them.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, fascinating there, Mark. That really enjoyed that presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. I look forward to more when you research more. Yeah, no, it was great. Anyone else got any other questions?
No, thank you very much. I'll see you all in November.
All right. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Yeah, well done, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. On that note, we'll say, thank you very much, Mark, and good night to everyone. All the best.
Thanks. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night from Brisbane.
Yeah, thanks for putting that on. That's great.